or no cost. Welcome everyone to our low or no cost clean fleet strategies for school districts webinar. I'm Amy Hodges. I'm a principal air quality planner with the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And I'm also part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities Coalition that is hosted within the Council of Governments. So there'll be three of us presenting today. I'd like the rest of the COG staff to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Jared Wright. I'm an air quality planner here at the Council of Governments in Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities. I'm working on Amy Hodges' team.
Savana Nance. I also work at the North Central Texas Council of Governments under Amy Hodges.
Thanks. And Lori Clark is our program manager and also our Clean Cities coordinator. So today we'll present low or no cost strategies for school districts to make your fleets more efficient and reduce emissions regardless of what fuel type you may have. These strategies can be done now by any fleet to make an immediate impact. So we feel like this is a very important topic. And part of what motivated us to cover this topic was we looked at the buses that were funded in the Dallas-Fort Worth area through the Volkswagen bus grant round. And we realized that 86% of the buses funded are diesel, 12% are propane, and 2% are electric. And that tells us that there are a lot of new diesel buses out there and will be in operation for quite a few years to come. So just a quick look at today's agenda. As you can see, we have a lot to cover. We're going to have some polling questions interspersed throughout today's webinar. So for those of you that have a fleet or work for a school district, we would appreciate your participation in those polling questions. Also, it's a great way to keep you guys engaged and keep you awake. And of course, always feel free to put your questions in the chat. So just a little bit about who we are. We are the North Central Texas Council of Governments, which is a voluntary association of local governments to assist local governments in regional planning and coordination for a 16-county region here in North Texas. Within the Council of Governments, we're also the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Dallas-Fort Worth region, which does transportation planning for a 12-county area. Our air quality planning efforts within the Transportation Department include supporting and implementing strategies that promote energy conservation, reduce demand for energy needs, and also reduce petroleum consumption and decrease greenhouse gas emissions. On the left side of this slide is our map of the region. The 10 counties shown in pink do not meet the federal standard for ground level ozone, and striving to bring our region into attainment is what drives our efforts as an air quality team. And finally, as the Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities Coalition, we're the local coalition that's part of the nationwide Department of Energy Clean Cities program. And we partner with public and private fleets to reduce their energy impact and increase fleet efficiency. And as I mentioned, Lori Clark is our Clean Cities coordinator. So nitrogen oxides are a major factor in the formation of ground level ozone. So our air quality efforts focus on reducing nitrogen oxides, which primarily come from tailpipe emissions. So here we're showing the sources of nitrogen oxides and how many tons per day of each source contributes. So as you can see on the right side of that pie, on-road mobile, and think cars and trucks here, they contribute over a third of the daily nitrogen oxides in the region. And in the breakout of this sector over to the right, you can see that the heavy duty vehicles contribute the most NOx, even though they're relatively few in number compared to the number of light duty vehicles on the road. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jared Wright, and he'll start off covering our strategies.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. So here's a highlight of the strategies we'll be covering for y'all. Be auto reduction, driver training, route optimization, RightSizing, Downsizing, and then finally biodiesel and other clean fuels. And we also wanted to remind y'all as we cover these strategies to not just think about how they can apply to your school buses, but also your white fleet and any other like vehicles you may be operating. So like Amy mentioned, we'll be running polling questions through this webinar. So this is new to us. So hopefully it goes well. It'll be the first couple polls. So you all should be seeing the poll now with 2 questions. Which strategies do you know the most about? Or which strategies do you know the least about? So please go ahead and answer. I'll give you all a few seconds. I also want to remind you all, try to only participate in the polls if you operate a fleet or a school district. To give you all a few more seconds to get some responses in. All right, looks like the responses have kind of stopped flowing in, so we'll give it maybe like 10 more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and share the results with y'all. All right, great. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll here and then share the results. So it looks like a lot of y'all know about auto reduction, driver training, but then not as much for right-sizing and downsizing. So hopefully y'all can learn about that today. And then same thing with biodiesel and other clean fuels. All right, so if you can go to the next slide, Amy, and go to our first strategy. Or the first, here we just go over the benefits of the strategies. So here you can see all the strategies I just mentioned on the left. And then we have these columns showing how the different benefits you can get from each of these strategies. So every strategy we'll cover today will save you money and help you reduce emissions. And then some have the other potential benefits of extending engine life or reducing vehicle noise. And then you also notice the icons at the top of this column. So we have one for saves money, reducing emissions, and extending engine life, and less road noise. So you'll notice these as we introduce each strategy. These will be in the top right of the slide, reminding you of the benefits for each strategy. Next slide. So here, our first strategy is going to be auto reduction, like I mentioned. And in the top right, you do see the icons. This one has all 4 benefits of saving money, reducing emissions, reducing noise, and extending engine life. So here will be our second polling question to see if y'all have a current strategy for auto reduction. So it'll just be the one question. I'll give y'all a second to answer. I'll give you all a few more seconds here so we get more answers in. All right, looks like that's about all we'll get. So we'll go ahead and end the poll here and share the results. So pretty even split. Slightly one more of y'all does than doesn't have a strategy to reduce idling. So we'll give y'all some tips here, and hopefully those of you that already have them can learn something, and those of you that don't can adopt a strategy. So just some quick facts. Idling consumes over 6 billion gallons of diesel and gasoline each year, and then half of this is from medium and heavy duty vehicles. And then one model year 2012 school bus idling for 200 hours burns up to $500 of diesel and produces over 3.4 pounds of NOx annually, which Amy mentioned we are in non-attainment for in our region. And this is assuming 200 hours per year based on the average from our national labs. So it may be different, higher or lower, depending on y'all's operations. And then vehicle idling also has harmful health effects. especially for children who have like smaller lungs and are breathing at a faster rate. According to the EPA, 1 minute of idling results in more carbon monoxide exposure than smoking 3 packs of cigarettes. And we have some more resources on the health effects of idling and how to reduce it on our Idle Free School Zone page. And we also have a packet we sent out to ISDs back in August, and we'll send that out to you all in a follow-up email. Next slide, please. So here you can see a graph we created using the A-Fleet tool, which Savana will cover in more detail later. But basically it allows us to view different parameters for vehicle acquisitions, such as like emissions, total cost of ownership, and payback. And so here we just modeled the NOx emissions of a school bus according to their model year. So you can see the NOx emitted in pounds on the y-axis, and then along the bottom on the x-axis, you can see the model year of the school bus. So you can see, especially in the pre-2009 and then 2006 and later as well, the emission standards are less stringent, and so those vehicles emit much more NOx for a region, which again, we are not in attainment for. And so if you're going to enter any, idle reduction aftermarket devices or idle reduction strategies, it's best to focus those on older buses where you'll get the most benefits. As well as for fleet turnover, it's important to replace older vehicles first, so you get the most benefits from those reduced emissions. Next slide. And so here I just want to cover some idle reduction best practices to help reduce vehicle idling. One of the most direct strategies to reduce idling is to adopt and enforce your idle reduction policy. We have an example anti-idling policy here at the COG, and we also have some example guidance documents and templates. And then the next step from there is to communicate this policy to your drivers. So this could be through like signage, either like stickers or like posters around like break rooms and things to remind them not to idle. And the Department of Energy has a resource called IdleBox, where they have a lot of free posters and signage you can print, as well as pledges and other materials for parents to get involved. And then you can take the next step and monitor and enforce your driver's behavior through GPS or telematics reports. And then you can also utilize driver training to emphasize vehicle idling and make sure that it's reduced. And like I just mentioned, there's several technology options to help reduce idling. There are aftermarket devices that can be installed. There's an EPA SmartWave verified list of anti-idling devices, and they can also get GPS telematics on your vehicles to collect info and monitor if they're idling. And then on the right there, I just want to mention this common myth from the EPA that it's better for an engine to run at idle speed than to run at regular speed. But according to the EPA, running at a low speed or idling causes twice the wear on internal parts than driving at regular speeds. So again, reducing idling not only reduces emissions, but it helps reduce wear and tear on your engine. Next slide. So we just want to highlight a couple more resources to reduce idling. IdleBox, like I just mentioned, has graphics and posters to inform staff not to idle that are free to download online. And the EPA also has their own Idle Free Schools toolkit that has some sample idle policies and resources for both drivers and parents. And then another common myth here is that it's important to warm up the engine with a long idle period during cold weather. But according to most manufacturers, most school buses don't need more than a few minutes to warm up, generally no more than like 3 to 5 minutes. And again, that's from the EPA. Next slide. So we just want to highlight a local success story. This is Rockwell ISD. We got this information from their 2020 annual survey, and we will be sending out our 2021 annual survey soon in January of 2022. So we hope we can get responses from all of y'all. And so just some highlights here. This applied to 120 buses, and just by adopting an idle reduction policy, Rockwell ISD estimated they reduced idling 30 minutes per day from the policy and educating their drivers. And this saved almost 6,000 gallons of gasoline equivalent and reduced over 70 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So those are part of the reasons why Rockwell ISD wanted to adopt the policy. And it was also for grant eligibility. So some grants will require you have an idle reduction policy, especially here at the COG. If you want to be eligible for funding made through from the Regional Transportation Council, you must adopt an idle reduction policy as well as our clean fleet policy. And then to monitor compliance, Rockwell ISD uses Xeon Telematics to monitor idling location, speed, and have a geofenced area for the buses. And they run reports weekly on how their buses are idling, and they follow up with any drivers that are not in compliance. And they also have yearly training on idle reduction for both their mechanics and drivers to remind them that mechanics come only idle to diagnose issues and drivers only idle under extenuating circumstances. So we do have Terry Penn from Rockwell ISD here, who is the Director of Transportation for Rockwell ISD, to see if y'all have any questions for him. Any questions on how they're using telematics or how they are trying to reduce idling through their policy.
Also, Terry, I would add, if we missed anything, please feel welcome to add on to what we said.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I can have one real quick. Let's see. Terry, how do you use telematics to monitor and enforce idling for individual drivers?
Yeah, so Seon, which is our camera system, and it also provides us with remote monitoring of the cameras. It has telemetrics extended that will provide us information and feedback on things such as not just the bus location, but speeds, idling, as we mentioned, the geofence, so you can build geofencing around your campuses so that you know when they're idling at a campus, you've identified that. Those reports are made available then to the supervisors who can address non-compliance issues with drivers. So I think that from a compliance standpoint, having electronics really does aid in your ability to be able to manage that. However, it's not necessary. You can build a system where you rely on students, rely on parents, rely on administrators, other drivers to help you monitor and guide your employees to a better compliance of your anti-idling policy. Any other questions for me? We've been doing this about 15, 16, or rather since 2014, 2015, somewhere in that neighborhood. We've received, I think we're up to 3 grants now that, primarily, as Jared mentioned, you do have to adopt an idling reduction or anti-idling policy to be considered for those grants. And then in some grants, you have to provide performance or compliance with your idling policy. So don't just think that adopting a policy and then stepping away from it or not enforcing it is going to, it's not just going to do the job. You've really got to manage it, and you've got to keep up with the results of that.
I had a quick question. So how do you do your yearly training? Do you get everybody in a room, or is it kind of an individual self-paced thing?
No, we at the first of every year, we do remind everyone of the policy, and we have a couple of videos that we will go through and answer questions. You're always going to have drivers that's going to talk about warming the bus. It's going to talk about comfort issues. It's going to talk about, the environment and how that environment plays a part on their comfort or the passenger comfort. And then you just talk through that with them and make sure that you've identified the strategies around how they would improve that comfort and or offset that comfort with the anti-idling policy. So it's through this training. It's preferred that you have a review of that mid-year, And then, of course, then what the one-off would be that you would have the non-compliance, and you would address that individually and work with those guys accordingly, and then follow up and review their performance after.
Hey, Terry, Savannah, I had a question if you don't mind.
Okay.
Have you ever had a complaint from a student or a parent about you guys maybe turning off the buses? I know you prioritize students' comfort and their safety, right? So that's never an issue. But has there ever been a complaint? You guys probably have one of the more strict idle reduction policies and more enforced. So
absolutely, you're going to get parents and students that will, and even sponsors, coaches and such, that will complain because the bus is hot whenever they get into it, or the bus is cold whenever they get step into the bus for a field trip or whatever. Yes, we've had those complaints, and those are easier to address because you can talk through the anti-idling policy and what that means and what we're trying to do for the environment. The more difficult ones are the ones where there's a medical reason, or there's some other concern. Say a smaller student, a younger student may come into the home after a bus ride from campus, and they're real sweaty and they appear to be sick, and obviously they got too hot on the bus, and that's very possible. However, in this day and time, I mean, not everybody still has air conditioning on every bus or every vehicle in this area. And that discomfort is just part of what I think everybody's accepted and understands that it's going to occur. And as most of you directors know, not the air conditioning on school buses isn't the same type of air conditioning that you find in an automobile. So it's not going to reduce the air in the bus quite the same way. And so there's going to be some one-offs that you're going to have to deal with the parents. And to your point, I think not just the parents complaining about the buses not idling. I've had a lot of complaints about the buses idling in the campus loading and unloading area that may have some kind of a problem where you can literally see the exhaust and smell it, and that brings to their attention that we're obviously idling when they would rather we didn't idle, and so you're addressing those idling issues as well.
Great, thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? I don't mind dropping my email in the chat room there for anyone who has a question offline. Be more than happy to answer that for them.
I guess I have a question. My name is Bojorquez. I'm from the Cedar Hill ISD. So I know a lot of the camera systems are tied into the school buses. So of course, after a certain amount of times the cameras turn off and whatnot. With this, how do you make sure that your cameras are rolling if the bus is off for a certain time? So I just moved to that area from San Antonio. I was with Northeast Northeast ISD, and we pretty much had the same rule where you can't idle, but the first student you see, you turn the bus on, which will result in you idling for a little while. So how do you, mend that?
Yeah, good question. So most of your camera systems are the bus camera systems that have been manufactured for the school buses. They are programmable, and you can set those up where they continue to record for a particular period of time once the ignition has gone off. And so there's a continuation of the camera recording, if you will, for a period of time as you deem necessary. Additionally, This is a good question because I've had this come up several times where if the buses go off, you want to make sure you wire things such as your GPS, your radio, a two-way radio, those items that you rely on for communication purposes or marking purposes. You want to wire those in a way that once that ignition goes off, you still have access to those so that you can hear the communication if the dispatch is trying to call you while your bus is in an off position. So then you would just have to train the drivers to make sure that they turn that radio or whatever it is, that equipment off after they've secured the bus for the afternoon. So there's some ways that you can work around your electronics and the power sources to those electronics.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Terry. That's great. If you have any other questions, Terry, if you don't mind putting your email in the chat, but thank you for answering those. Let's go to the next slide, Amy. So our next strategy we want to cover is driver training. So again, you can see on the top right, this strategy can help save money, reduce emissions, and extend engine life. So now I'll be running our next poll, see if y'all are currently using driver training. And if I remember from the first poll, this should be pretty unanimously yes, but we'll see if these results change a little bit. Give you a few more seconds to enter your responses. All right, I'll go ahead and end it there for the last responses. So it looks like the majority of y'all do, but still about 25% do not say they use any driver training. So just some details here on driver training to help can help save you fuel and money by reducing emissions, and can also increase your driver skills and improve performance by just helping them be a little more cautious and just in general safer overall. So the main way to reduce emissions here is just through driving techniques. Rapid acceleration and braking can lower fuel economy by 15 to 30% at highway speeds and up to 10 to 40% in traffic, and that can increase annual fuel costs by over $1,000. And so just some effects here, it'll, like I just mentioned, improve fuel economy, reduce wear and tear on vehicles by constant, brake wear and hard accelerations. And it can also just improve safety by driving a little more cautiously and slower. Next slide. So here are some best practices for driver training. And again, keep in mind, this can apply not only to your buses, but also your white fleet as well, especially those top points there for combining trips and reducing vehicle load. So obviously any extra weight you have in a vehicle will make it heavier and reduce the economy. So just taking out unnecessary equipment for your white fleet and then combining any trips by putting more people in the same vehicle. And then also to help maintain your vehicle, just keeping your tires inflated and other proper maintenance measures can really improve your fuel economy, as well as what I just mentioned of driving a little more conservatively and slowing down. And some other tips to make your driving training program a little bit stronger, to incorporate feedback, monitor your driver behavior and provide feedback, kind of similar to what Terry was just talking about. They have those weekly reports. So just making sure drivers are aware of exactly how they should be driving and of what the policies are. And then for, you can also offer incentives. So you can encourage drivers to adopt efficient driving behaviors by offering different incentives for meeting certain targets. Like in the next point, you can set policies and goals for like minimum fuel efficiency targets and set maximum driving speeds. Next slide. So our next strategy we want to go over is route optimization. You can see on the top right, this will help save money and reduce emissions. And so this is sort of planning your routes to increase efficiency by avoiding things like hills, traffic congestion, low speeds, and utilizing right-hand turns where possible. So to help reduce idle time. And this often uses like specialized route optimization software. So we'll run a quick poll here on route optimization. See if y'all are currently using it. So I'll give you a few seconds to respond. Give about 10 more seconds. Looks like we got some quick responses this time. All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and share these results. So looks pretty unanimously yes. All of y'all that responded do use route optimization. So hopefully you'll learn a little bit here about how you can make it a little bit more efficient. So some potential effects from route optimization. It can reduce the number of routes your buses have, or it can reduce total bus miles traveled, and while maximizing the number of students on the bus and reducing the distance buses travel without students. And we do have an example case study here that MIT did with Boston Public Schools. And some of the effects of that study, after they switched to a 3-bus schedule, they were able to remove 50 buses from the fleet, resulting in $5 million in yearly savings without an increase in average student riding time. And this led to approval of school start time reform, like I just mentioned, of changing to a 3-bus schedule. Next slide. So here are some details on a current success story in our region from Denton ISD. So from their route optimization efforts, they had 29 buses driving less, which about 8,000 miles less per vehicle, resulting in about an annual gasoline gallon equivalent reduction of over 44,000 gallons and a greenhouse gas emission reduction of 534 tons, resulting in annual fuel cost savings of over $117,000. And so this was due to adopting a 3-rail schedule, which had staggered start times for both elementary, middle, and high school to allow fewer buses to transport the same number of students. So Denton ISD has optimized routes by implementing Edgelog route optimization software, using things like community stops in front of areas such as like apartment complexes or trailer parks to minimize the time on the road. And then instead of like entering them and spending more time driving the buses through these more tight turns and small communities. And then it's also they have paired their Edgelog system with GPS software to help monitor routes. And so we may have Denton ISD online to help answer any questions, either Jennifer or Alan, but I'm not sure if they were able to join today. So if you have any questions for them, feel free to ask and we can bring it to them later if they aren't here right now.
It doesn't look like they're online. They might have to join a little later. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. So as Jared said, if you guys do have questions, you're welcome to ask them and we might be able to answer them. And if we can't, we'll get with Denton ISD and get an answer.
All right, well, thank you all. Yeah, we'll let you know if you have any questions for Denton ISD, and if not, we'll move on to our next section here. Should be Amy.
Thanks, Jared. So I'm going to talk about RightSizing. So this is RightSizing vehicles, and it refers to matching the right vehicle to the job. And this is with the goal of using the most fuel efficient and lowest emitting vehicle for that operation. And so this can potentially save money, reduce emissions, and also potentially reduce noise. Jared, you want to throw out the polling question on this, and we'll see who all is using RightSizing. We'll just give it a couple more seconds. All right, well, thanks. Looks like you want to share the results? Looks like about 50-50. All right, thanks. So as an example, a 10% reduction in the weight of the vehicle could actually improve the fuel economy by 6 to 8%. And as you can see, that can really save some money over the lifetime of a school bus. So some examples of right-sizing, for instance, you could use a small sedan for administrative duties rather than an SUV or a pickup truck. This could be just maybe someone that needs to travel from one school to another. Another example could be using a smaller bus or van for a route that is not typically full of students, rather than a full-size bus that's only partially full. Another example could be instead of a full-size pickup truck, going with a smaller truck. Maybe they don't need to do towing or hauling, so they just don't need that power. So maybe a smaller truck could do the job. So to identify these situations in the white fleet, you can look at what is the purpose of the vehicle? What is it used for? Does it need to tow anything? And how frequently is it used? How much cargo space is needed? And how many passengers does it typically need to carry? And then for the yellow fleet, you can evaluate the usage, looking at the number of passengers, for instance. And then just as a tip, you can use tools to calculate the fuel and emissions and maintenance savings comparing one larger vehicle to a smaller vehicle, and we can help you do that. And that may help you convince whoever it is that's asking for the vehicle that maybe a smaller vehicle could actually do the job. So let's talk about downsizing. So this is referring to downsizing the entire fleet. So this is eliminating excess and underutilized vehicles and equipment from the fleet. And this can result in cost savings, reducing emissions, and potentially also reducing the cost of maintenance. So Jared, you want to throw out the polling question on this one? Let's see what everybody's doing. Okay, Jared, do you want to share the results? Looks like we had 9 responding. Yeah, so close to half and half again. Okay, thanks, Jared. So some examples of downsizing. You could consider using a motor pool for vehicles that aren't used on a daily basis. Maybe not everyone needs a vehicle if they're not using it every day. Also, removing older vehicles that are no longer assigned to anything specific. Instead of looking at what's due to be replaced, maybe you just get rid of it and don't replace it with something else. So to identify underutilized, unnecessary vehicles in the white fleet, you can look at daily and annual miles to identify underutilization. And then if they are underutilized, consider putting them in the motor pool or just getting rid of them. And then for the yellow fleet, maybe route optimization would be a good option to look at opportunities to pare down the size of the fleet. So in Arlington ISD's 2020 annual survey, they cited an example of right-sizing. So they looked at their security department, and they were able to go from a full-size half-ton pickup truck for the security department staff, which got 15 miles per gallon. They were able to right-size that to a Chevrolet Colorado getting 28 miles per gallon. And they did that with 6 vehicles. So that reduces their gasoline gallon equivalents by about 2,700 gallons per year, and the greenhouse gas emissions being reduced about 33 tons per year. So that's really significant, and that's only 6 vehicles. So this resulted in environmental benefits, also fuel and savings in the oil changes. And then to decide what vehicles to right size, and this is Guy Jones, and I believe he's on the call today. He looked at type and amount of cargo needing to be carried in the pickup trucks. Did they need to tow anything? What did they need to carry? How many miles they were being traveled per year? And then he was able to calculate what he could save. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions to Guy. Guy, if you want to turn on your video and be available for any questions about right sizing. So any questions for Guy? And Guy, if you could confirm, are you able to get your audio going? Looks like you're muted. It's possible he got busy with a fleet issue. So I don't know if he really is available.
Amy, Terry Penn.
Yes.
I'd like to add that this would
Sure.
be a great opportunity for school districts to consider electric or hybrid vehicles as well. In a lot of our, the way we use our white fleet, they're used in a manner that from a day-to-day basis, there's not that many miles that are being driven. So from an electric vehicle perspective, I think that would be a prime opportunity to come in and just eliminate your fossil fuel.
Excellent point,
Sorry,
Terry.
Amy.
Thank you.
One sec here. The perils of being double booked. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for joining.
Sorry.
Completely understand.
Okay. The one thing I would say, at least as far as what we found, and this was one point that I wanted to at least chime in on. When I first got to Arlington ISD 6 years ago, we had ran traditionally with a 54 passenger sped bus. But on average, we have 10 to 12 passengers on those buses. Now, obviously, things like high visibility, larger bus, safety concerns, things along that line. But as far as utilization of that bus, we had discussions and looked into the feasibility of maybe going to a shuttle bus, but in a sped configuration. And we have since transitioned to a smaller microbus, Collins type bus, to where it's traditionally a 14 passenger bus. And then our 8 to 10 passengers fit fine, and we can configure for wheelchairs, et cetera. The only thing that we have had conversations about recently is, knock on wood, we haven't had any accidents with our smaller shuttle type buses. But in the event of a shuttle bus sped configuration, we are wondering if we're going to be backpedaling pretty quick if in the event an accident happens and, it's kind of a catastrophic effect, if admin is going to say, well, we should have never went to smaller buses to begin with. There was a reason why we had 54 passenger buses, larger buses, higher visibility, et cetera. So that would be about the only thing that I would chime in on, is that everything is rosy until maybe a catastrophic event comes up, and then maybe right sizing for passenger load was maybe not such a great idea. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you. Any questions for Guy? And Guy, if you're available to stick around to the end, we will have a period there for questions as well.
Okay, and I'll be watching the chat. Again, I'm going to be on mute, but I will be monitoring the slides. And I may have to comment by chat, but at least I saw her name there, so I didn't want to be disconnected quite to that degree.
Yes, thanks so much.
Not a problem.
Okay. So we're going to move on to alternative fuels. So I will turn it over to Savana Nance.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. So we did want to take some time to talk about alternative fuels as a clean fleet strategy, just because they can help reduce emissions. They can, depending on the fuel type, have savings in fuel and maintenance, and they can sometimes be more quiet. So really quick, as we have been, we are going to have a quick polling question on alternative fuels. Jared, can you launch that? So if you guys are currently using either biodiesel or another alternative fuel or electric vehicle, please go ahead and answer that. Maybe give it 5 more seconds and then we'll go ahead and turn this off and show the results. All right, so looks like most of you are not, that is okay. That is what the audience we were hoping to reach today. So alternative fuels, as we said, are a good strategy, but today we're mostly going to be talking about biodiesel because biodiesel is going to be one of the easier ones to implement for fleets that are mostly using conventional diesel vehicles. As a reminder, if you're interested in alternative fuels, you can go to the AFDC's transportation webpage to see models of available school bus. And then as well as you can use the Alternative Fuel Lifecycle Environmental and Economic Tool, or A-Fleet, to calculate the simple payback, emissions reductions, and more. So if you don't understand how to use it, we can also calculate those things for you. So on the right, there's an example of the annual petroleum usage of different school buses that we calculated from A-Fleet. So next slide, please. So biodiesel. Biodiesel is going to be a domestically produced, renewable, biodegradable fuel that's going to provide an emission benefit with minimal conversion or changes needed to your fleet. It also can be less combustible than petroleum diesel, and it is going to be a little bit safer in terms of being non-toxic, non-carcinogenic. So on the right, you can see an example of another graph we calculated using A-Fleet, showing the reduction of greenhouse gases and petroleum usage from utilizing a B20 blend of biodiesel in a 2020 school bus. It may not look like a huge reduction, but like we said, this is without any sort of conversion or investment in a new vehicle, such as propane, no minimal training on new vehicles for your staff. And this is also showing a 2020 buses reduction. If you were putting biodiesel in, say, a 2007, 2008 bus, there's going to be a significant greenhouse gas reduction. Next slide, please. So biodiesel, we just wanted to touch on how it's created, is made through oil, grease, and tallow being put through a process called transesterification, which is where it is reacted with a short chain alcohol and a catalyst, and it creates B100 biodiesel or pure biodiesel. Just wanted to point out we have a local biodiesel producer in DFW that we work with on our holiday grease roundup, which is where people can drop off their cooking oil and grease. So if anyone's interested in participating in that, there's going to be a link in the chat on how to participate in that. Next slide. So here we have different biodiesel blends. So B100 is going to be what's created after that initial trans-esterification process. It's going to be pure biodiesel. It is going to have the most emissions benefits if you use it. It's going to reduce the most greenhouse gases, but it's also going to have the most considerations and maybe a couple more issues than if you blended it with conventional diesel, creating a lower blend. So B20 and B5 are common blends of biodiesel. B20 is going to be 20% biodiesel and 80% petroleum. B5 is going to be a 5% biodiesel and a 95% conventional diesel. So as you go down in the concentration of biodiesel, there is going to be less of a difference in the emissions, but there are benefits to consider, which are listed here in consideration. So B20 generally can be used in any engine without any conversion, but it can sometimes void the engine warranty, so you will need to check that. It's going to be similar in horsepower and torque to conventional diesel, but it won't be identical. And there can be a gelling issue in the winter, and then as well as it can clog the fuel filters as well. B5, which is low-level biodiesel, it's going to be safe for any diesel engine, and it's going to also operate almost identically. So anyone can use B5 if they have a diesel engine. Next slide. So some tips for implementing biodiesel and resources if you are interested in doing so. First off, as I said, B20 can have some warranty issues. So we have attached the National Biodiesel's OEM Statement Summary Chart, which is a long name to say that the Biodiesel Board has released a list of common OEMs and then what biodiesel level they have accepted. So, for example, I believe on that chart, Thomasville buses, which is a common brand I'm sure people are operating, they accept any sort of B20 blend. But if you go higher than B20, you might have some issues and you might need to do a small conversion to the engine. So definitely check that out if you're interested in implementing biodiesel. Next, you will need to decide if you want to purchase your biodiesel pre-blended or if you would like to blend it on site. You can purchase a B100 biodiesel and then blend it with conventional diesel on site if you would prefer, or you can just bulk purchase pre-blended fuel at a concentration that you would like to use. We have a list of local biodiesel stations and dealers for you to look at. And then we also recommend that as you're going through this process, preemptively plan for the cold weather. You will need to probably get an anti-gel additive or just decide to phase out biodiesel during the winter. It will definitely help more than just, you don't want to come across the issue of it's freezing, I suppose. Denton ISD can talk more about those issues if they join later on. Finally, biodiesel does have a problem with kind of the thicker consistency because of the properties, and so it can need at certain concentrations of biodiesel to have more fuel filter changes. So B20 and up, you may have to take that into consideration. Okay, sorry. And then finally, biodiesel is exempt from the Texas diesel tax. I know it's not relevant for school districts, but other people are on the line. So next slide. And then, as we said, Denton ISD successfully uses biodiesel. So I don't know if they're on, but if they aren't, again, please let us know if you have any questions and we will go ask them. They're known for their propane usage, but they also have 29 buses using biodiesel. In 2020, they used 5,000 gallons of B20 biodiesel, and through that, they were able to reduce 1,000 gallons of GGE, and they reduced 8.2 tons of greenhouse gases. They did so for the environmental benefits, and to avoid the gelling issue that we talked about, they decided to only use biodiesel during the warmer months of April to October. And they also have fuel stabilizers and anti-gel additives in case of an emergency if they don't get it out fast enough. They use B20 blend since any higher would void their warranty with International. So do you guys have any questions on biodiesel that we could either try to answer or we can ask DNISD and get back to you?
And feel free to put any questions in the chat and we can get back to Alan Wilcox later with those questions.
Okay, and as a reminder, we're going to send out this slide deck afterwards. So all of these links and resources you will have if you're interested in looking into them, or you can just reach out and contact us and we're happy to talk you through it. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk about funding because that's what we like to talk about. This is going to be funding. We're going to talk about funding for just school buses, and we're going to talk about funding for your kind of white fleet or maybe other vehicles you may have. For school buses, the recently passed Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has been very much talked about, so we wanted to give you guys a little bit of information on it. There is going to be $5 billion available for their Clean School Bus program. 2.5 of that, so half of it is going to be for zero emission, half of it is going to be for low emission, which means biodiesel, propane, CNG, and then electric would be eligible as well. So definitely keep an eye out for that. It's going to be implemented in a 5-year program with $1 billion of those funds being available every year, going from 2022 to 2026. So the EPA will be implementing this and they will be announcing additional details in March. So definitely start planning for that if you're interested in transitioning to an alternative fuel. Those funds are coming. Feel welcome to reach out to talk to us about it. Whenever they start that funding and they release more information, if they do not hold a webinar on that funding, we will. So the Texas Clean School Bus Program, I see guys interested. That is going to be through TERP, which is going to be the Texas Commissions on Environmental Quality's program for funding. It is opening soon. TCEQ said January 2022, so a month out. It is going to be statewide, and it provides funding for the replacement of diesel school buses. The amount of funding will vary depending on the old school bus model year and what you are replacing with. So if you're going diesel to diesel, you're not going to get that 80%. I think diesel to electric is the only one that gets an 80% funding, but it will be different depending on the year of the old school bus. So I know the TCEQ said they will likely be holding a program on that soon, or a webinar on that soon. So we will keep you guys up to date on that. Finally, the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act. It has closed for 2021, but it is an annual funding program that's going to open again in 2022. It's chosen through a lottery and it provides funding for diesel school bus replacement. There are flat funding amounts of $20,000, $25,000, $30,000, and $65,000, depending on what you're replacing with. So I'm going to pause there and ask if anyone has questions on any of those 3 programs. And then one thing I wanted to add on the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act is I'm sure you guys have heard all about the $5 billion that's available for school buses, but there's going to be $500 million available for only school districts to install renewable technologies, to install alternative fuel infrastructure that can be public or private, and to make energy improvements to the school. They have not announced when that funding is going to be available, but we just wanted to put that on y'all's radar. It's going to be through the DOE and the Department of Transportation, and we will be reaching out as soon as we know about that money. And finally, as a reminder, school districts can also partner with NCTs to assist them in the acquisition and transition to alternative fuel school buses. We actually have one of those entities on the line today, so I will hand it to them in just a moment. Next slide. So this is going to be the funding opportunities for your Wright fleet that we kind of discussed, and some of this you can also replace school buses with. One program that is available is the TERP Light Duty Motor Vehicle Purchase or Lease Incentive Program. So as Terry Penn said, alternative fuels and maybe electric are great for kind of the Wright fleet because they don't travel necessarily as many miles. They idle a lot. So this is going to provide $2,500 rebate for electric vehicles and $5,000 rebate for CNG and propane. If you're interested in this program, they do have a list of the eligible vehicles on the TCEQ's website. So if you want to click on that link, you can see what's eligible and then go make a purchase and get that rebate. The other program that's open right now is the North Texas Clean Diesel project that is being implemented by us at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and it is with EPA funds. So that program provides a 45% funding level if the new vehicle that you are purchasing is electric, 35% if it is carb low NOx, and 25% for diesel or gasoline. So the important thing about this program is that if you are replacing with electric or carb low NOx, aka propane, then the old school bus model year or old model year of the diesel vehicle does not matter. So we have heard from several people that maybe the 2011, 2012 diesel buses that they want to get rid of aren't eligible for any funding. So with this program, if you were replacing those 2012 buses with electric or propane, they would be eligible for some funds. So the deadline for that program is coming up in a couple weeks, so January 14th, 2022. And we are hosting a webinar next Monday that you guys can attend if you're interested. And I think Jared will post the registration in the chat.
And Savana, I just want to make a quick point about that North Texas Clean Diesel project. So it's a rolling deadline. So the next application deadline is January 14th. If there's money left after January 14th, they will keep it open. And then 3 months later, they'll have another application deadline.
Thanks, Amy. So final funding that we did want to mention is that the Diesel Emission Reduction Act is also coming up. That is the EPA's program. It provides the same funding level as our North Texas Clean Diesel project, so 45% of electric, 35% of carb low NOx, and 25% for other. This program is a little more longer application to apply for. And so we wanted to let everyone know that if you're interested, we can help on part of the application, which is the air quality part. So that part, we can help do the calculations to see how much of a reduction you would get to report on the application. And then we can also kind of help write, I believe it's an impact statement into the air quality section, I believe is what it's called. So if you are interested in those funds and you would like to meet with us to discuss further, feel welcome to reach out and we can have a meeting. And then there are other grants available, but we're not going to go into detail. They're all linked so you guys can click on them whenever you want. But what we did want to mention is, as you can see, there's a lot of funding programs, and we can kind of help you identify what programs you are and are not eligible for. We call it our fleet grant eligibility evaluation. So you send us the information that we would need, and you send us the vehicles. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'm a little sick, but you send us the vehicles you want to be replaced, and we will look into the eligibility of those vehicles. And we will send you a list of the grants that that vehicle can be replaced with. And sometimes we can give an estimated grant amount. And sometimes we can let you know around when that grant will be opening. So if you're interested in that, you can just email any of us and we can talk you through the process. Also, if you're interested in alternative fuels, feel welcome to reach out to us, and we have a lot of information on that as well. So I'm going to pause. Does anyone have questions on funding before I hand it over to Hunt Energy to talk about their partnership program? Hearing none, is Bill from Hunt Energy online?
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Savana.
Yeah, you sound great. I'm gonna let him go.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Savana, for allowing me some time to talk about sort of our partnership proposition. For background, Hunt is a Dallas-based company. It is a privately owned part of a portfolio of companies owned by the Hunt family. They have historically been in ranching, investments, real estate, oil and gas, but more and more we're growing into power. We formed a utility 20 years ago, and we've done a lot of development, particularly around, if you go to the next page, interconnecting renewable generations. In the Panhandle, if you've been to Amarillo, we interconnected about 4,000 megawatts of wind resources by interconnecting or building the transmission infrastructure needed to connect those resources. Right now, we're also working on large storage solutions. This is sort of a need in our system to help regulate or complement solar and wind patterns. When the wind doesn't blow, sun doesn't shine, we can store electricity for later time. By the way, a megawatt, we talk about 4,000 megawatts and 500 megawatts. Just to give you a size comparison, 1 megawatt is about the load or the demand of a hospital or a Target, Super Walmart. That's a megawatt. An electric bus is going to be in the 300 to 600 kW, or a fraction of a megawatt. We are currently building a lot of storage, so we gain a lot of expertise into charging equipment, discharging, helping the grid when needed. And so as a result, we're very interested in investing in electric vehicle charging, with an emphasis on school buses, because we believe the school bus fleets coupled with a smart charging discharging system can help both accelerate the EV implementation at school districts and help our Texas grid in times of need. You all remember what happened last February. This is something that while buses probably didn't go out on routes, that they could have helped, provide some energy back to the grid, and then say charge in the daytime when we had electricity, and discharge at night when temperatures drop and people went without power for heating. Next slide, please. I'm going to go over this, and it may be something you guys have talked about before. I didn't see any background today, but these are the three types of chargers. We call it level 1, 2, and 3. So you know, I have, for example, an EV at my house, and I have the option to charge it with a 120 volt connection, just a simple plug-in, or a 240 volt connection. To charge my car or to charge a bus, you know, it will take a couple of days on a 120 volt charge. When you get to 240 volts, it will take, you know, hours, you know, overnight. A lot of folks, because of the cost of the 240 volt charging equipment, opt for 240. That's adequate. But if what I'm going to be talking about is the fast charging, more expensive equipment that works at 480 volts with direct current, and these equipments are, you know, thousands of dollars, but they are far more flexible in terms of your ability to charge a school bus, and for the purposes that we also propose in our partnership, which is the ability to once in a while be able to support the Texas grid when the bus are not needing to do routes and when the system is in an emergency condition. Next slide, please. So when we talk about two-way systems, we have a connection to the transmission or the power lines of the local utility. And you see the cars on the left, basically some at mid-charge, some full charge, some charging. And you see the two arrows on those chargers. These can only be done with those type 3, higher voltage, higher speed charging. And by the way, these chargers can charge, you know, something called, Tesla calls a superchargers, or something called a fast charger. They can charge a vehicle, you know, between 30 minutes and an hour. So that's why it's important to have fast charging vehicles, stations, charge stations, so that we can quickly replenish a battery if it's used to support the grid. So you see in this charge station, there's arrows going into the charging station at the bottom and out of the vehicles to the grid at some instances. And this is important because we're interested in partnering with someone that can also sort of support the idea of a two-way system. Next slide, please, Savana. So this is kind of a busy chart, but the idea here is that you have on the left the grid, and the grid is basically providing power through what's called an AC, alternative current, to a DC direct current converter. That converter basically provides DC power to the charging terminals, buses, truck on the right. That converter can also be charging a battery. So we could, for example, charge a battery with clean, renewable power, say middle of the night when power is being produced, or middle of the day if there's solar power. Or if you have your own photovoltaic, it's on the left bottom. So this shows sort of combining renewables and batteries, and Savana mentioned something about DOE funding possibly available for renewable integration and for additional supply options at schools. All of these investments, we would work in close cooperation with the districts to ensure that they can take advantage of TERP funding from the TCEQ, the Infrastructure Investment and Job Acts, et cetera. Anything that's available to support and help, we would be more than happy to help in this collaboration. The objective, if you go to the last page there, Savana, is initially, we were talking to a couple of school districts about, how about if you all buy buses and we provide the charging infrastructure, option 1 on the first row. And the problem that we run into is that, EVs are expensive, right? School electric buses are, 3 times the cost of a diesel. So it was a bit cost prohibitive. And one of our conditions was we need several of them to make a dent in the supply side of the equation. So if you do 1 or 2, it takes a lot of infrastructure to put them on. We were looking for a minimum of 6 or 7. With the additional funding that may be available at the state and federal levels, we may be able to do still that minimum partnership. But we come up with a couple of other options. What if Hunt adds a battery? One of our, I remember we talked about 500 megawatt batteries that we're trying to install throughout the state. What if the school has sufficient land to allow us to put an energy storage system, and then it doesn't matter how many buses you want to charge from that system. So this second option is on the third column, EV bus and BESS. We add another check saying, hey, we could provide a battery system, kind of like the one we saw on the previous page. And it doesn't matter how many buses you connect, we will install all the charging infrastructure. And we will basically figure out how we can all win as a result, meaning the cost to the school district will be no more than the equivalent of the diesel investment plus a diesel fuel. But in this scenario, which is the second one, where we have a EV bus and a battery, we would like to install a battery system as well. The third option is what we call fleet as a service. You may have heard this from other suppliers, but we would also be willing to own the electric vehicles, the buses, maintain them, and in combination with the battery and hopefully future combination with solar facilities, we can provide this as a service. And again, the idea will be to meet or beat the diesel equivalent price for the school district. So those are the sort of the alternatives we're putting out there. We would love to discuss the design, a pilot opportunity with any and all of your interested school districts. We're here from North Texas, sitting in downtown Dallas right now. So we're just a quick drive away, and be happy to answer any questions. Savannah, you may want to go to the last page so that people have, I sent you an updated version with my contact info we can post later.
Sorry, just saw that. I will put your contact info in the chat for you, okay?
Yeah.
So if anyone has any questions, they can email Bill or reach out to us and we'll connect you with him. So not hearing any questions, and we are getting close to time. Thank you, Bill, for presenting, and we'll reach out if anyone has any questions. We did want to quickly, quickly cover the resources that are going to be available for you guys to look at after our webinar concludes. So of course the AFDC, the Alternative Fuel Data Center, A-Fleet, and then our webpage are all going to be in the slide deck. But one thing we also included is the State Energy Conservation Office's website. So SECO can provide free energy efficiency audits for school districts where they will come in and they will tell you opportunities for increasing efficiency or maximizing efficiency, I suppose. So if you're interested, please reach out to them. We also have the Texas Emissions Reduction Plan funding linked. So this will all be available to you. Next slide. And this is going to be, I think, the most useful slide for you guys, where we have the strategies listed out and the resources that either we used or that we think you should use to implement. So we have all of the idle reduction websites that we could find that provide either information on how to run an effective idle reduction campaign, or maybe some free materials you can order, such as driver brochures, signs, those kind of things. We also have a link for the Alternative Fuel Data Center's driver training page, a list of different school bus routing software, if you're interested in some new software. And then we also have 2 links to guides on RightSizing and Downsizing. And these guides were, the first one was developed by NAFA and Agile Fleet. And it helps kind of talk you through how to create a methodology on when to right-size and when to downsize. And that's a great resource. And then we also have the federal vehicle allocation model methodology that is used by federal fleets. So this also is a great resource if you would just like to duplicate the federal fleet's right-sizing and downsizing methodology. And then finally, for biodiesel, we do have the National Biodiesel Board, as they have lots of information on who is going to be compatible, what OEMs are going to be compatible with biodiesel, and then resources for the fleets. And then next slide. We have one more poll if you guys don't mind staying on for a little bit longer, just to wrap this up. So if you guys can let us know if this was informative and strategies you might look into moving forward, it really helps us out. All right, so maybe 10 more seconds on this poll. I know it's a little longer. Okay, well, great. Thank you, everyone, so much for answering. I think we can go ahead and share the results. Our contact information is going to be on the slide, so please feel welcome to reach out to any of us if you have questions. And if anyone has any last-minute questions, you are welcome to ask them now. If not, then we can adjourn a few minutes early.
I believe we still have Terry Penn on the phone and possibly Guy Jones, if anyone has any questions for them specifically. Okay, great. And also feel free to put your questions in the chat and we'll get back to people for you.
Yeah, and just one last shout out. If you want the free signs for idle reduction, we had a couple of requests come into the chat. Please go ahead and let us know and we'll get those for y'all.
Well, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to our fleet managers that participated, Terry Penn and Guy Jones, and to Hunt Energy. So we will be posting this, as we said, on our meetings webpage the recording and the slides, so you'll have access to all the links and all these slides. So thank you so much, everyone. Great to see you today.